Welcome, my darlings, to my humble chateau. Please make yourself very comfortable. Relax your mind and release your imagination to me. I will bring you a story to entrance and entertain. Perhaps a frightening one. Perhaps a steampunk. Perhaps a bit of mythology. Anyway, sit back, enjoy, and subscribe to me. Snow, a Steempunk Fairy Tale by Finlay. Part 1, Chapter 1. There was a time before the Great Separation where very little distinction was made between the rich and the poor, because no matter who you were, everyone lived grounded on earth. This was before the king and his sons lived among the clouds, before rich barons lived in their own floating castles, and it was just before the height of the steam-powered revolution. There were very few engineers within high society, and even few gadgeteers. It was an era on the cusp of cultural change. It was during this era that a brilliant engineer named Maestro Peto met his one true love. Together their story is incredible, an adventure of true love and great loss. But this is not about their story. This story is about their daughter, born on a cold winter's day, a rare beauty with alabaster skin, ruby red lips, and ebony black hair that shined as dark as the night sky. The tiny bundle of joy was named Snow, after Rhiannon's grandmother. Even though their whole village celebrated Snow's arrival, it had been a long labor and a difficult birth, one that the beautiful Rhiannon never recovered from. As the years went by, Mastro began to make a name for himself in the kingdom as an accomplished engineer. More consultant work came in for him. Requests to design a new coal drilling platform, invent a new mechanical steam-powered tea cart for the societies, or to oversee modification design for the latest locomotive engine. He was eventually able to leave much of the essential plan design to Snow while he began planning and designing for his own engineering work, a steam-powered floating platform. Before long, it became all he ever worked on, giving much of his time and focus over to his masterpiece. Always the bearer of intelligence and kindness, Snow excelled in everything she did, and it wasn't long before she became a successful student, sharing her father's love of all things mechanical. They would always be found together, covered in grease, working in the basement workshop of their small townhouse on the outskirts of the village. But more often than not, Snow was left to her own mechanical devices, until one day an extraordinary thing occurred. "Father, I'm home, and I have some wonderful news." Snow moved quickly through the clutter in the hall, around the gadgets and spare parts in the living room, and knocked on the workshop door. Leaving her satchel bag and workbook on the side table, she quickly opened the door and swept her skirts aside to let Edison out before he jumped upon her, ruining another dress. Edison, part dog, part monstrosity, was a gift from her father as a "I know you're grieving and a dog won't make up for the loss of your mother, but I'm trying" gift. Normal parents gave their kids fancy gadgets that were becoming more and more popular. Her dad gave her a fur ball that grew into a small horse. Letting Edison lick her face, she scratched his ear and patted his side. I know, I miss you too. Now off you go and stay in the yard this time, please." She shoved him towards the back door. Holding up a newsprint, she climbed down the basement stairs and rounded the desk to find her dad hunched over his work. "The Mirror! It featured my pictorial commentary I produced last month. I can't believe it," she cried as she straightened up. His blank expression said it all. "Father?" she exclaimed as she swung herself around, landing on a pile of design plans and worksheets. That was the armchair, much to the consternation of her father. It had been this way for as long as she could remember. Her father completely focused on his work, his designs, his plans. Mathematical equations, physical theorem, analytical data, all of it. His life's focus. Oh, don't fret. He certainly loved and looked after his only daughter, but it often ended up with his daughter looking after him. If it weren't for her, he'd forget to sup. "Well, if it is any consultation," he said quietly, as if his own news was of no import, "we finally won funding for my floating city designs." He carefully extracted papers and journals from underneath his daughter, waiting for his words to finally filter through her busy thoughts. Then she jumped up, giving Peto an awful fright. Her squeal could be heard halfway to the Smithies show across town. Overwhelmed with delight, Snow hugged her father, then proceeded, ward of the sudden affection of a rather sloppy dog. She congratulated her father, peppering him with a dozen questions, and well, that was the catalyst for the biggest adventure of Snow's life. Chapter 2. The next day, Snow arrived home to find the house very quiet and very empty. She strolled through each room, talking aloud, thinking her father was there, only to discover his workshop all tidied up. Not one single piece of paper in sight. No journals, no plans, no equations. Not an iota of evidence he'd been working there for 2 years non-stop. Everything was gone, even Edison. A loud knock on the front door startled her out of confusion and into great concern. She ran into the parlor, swung open the door, and braced herself for the worst news possible. "My father? Is he okay? Where is he? I must find him," she prattled on before she even looked to see who was standing there. When she looked up, clear blue eyes stunned her into silence. Standing before her stood a lanky, young stranger, hair sticking up all over the place. With one hand raised in the air where the door should have been, he looked on Snow with as much shock on his face as hers. Then a small, shaggy mountain barged its way through the open door, bowling Snow over and dragging the handsome stranger into the home. "Oof!" she exclaimed, as doggy drool lathered her face. "Edison, Edison, stop! Please stop!" And the warm tongue ceased its licking. "Oh, my apologies. Please, I beg your pardon, miss." Once she had managed to set herself on her own 2 feet again, and removed much of the doggy saliva from her brow, Snow had in her mind to tell this home invader exactly what she thought of him. "How dare you come into my home? Please, Miss Peto, let me explain. I'm a hunter, your father's new assistant. I've been out walking Edison, and I didn't mean to frighten you. he said very quickly. "We've just been down at the park chasing squirrels well, Edison's been chasing squirrels. I've been chasing Edison," he continued with a smirk. "Your dog is a very big dog. Huge, in fact." And with that, the dog stood up on its hind legs, placed both its front paws on Hunter's shoulder, and licked his face. "Edison, down! Stop that at once!" She jumped forward, mortified, and took the dog's collar and pulled him down and away from the parlor, through the kitchen and out through the back door. Closing the door, she took a deep breath and turned around. "My father, where is he?" remembering again all at once. "He is fine, Miss Petto," he interrupted her. "He's in his new workshop, setting things up, and is finalizing details with the Baroness on his work." The Baroness?" She slumped onto a kitchen chair, rubbing her forehead with a gloved finger. "Oh, yes, the Baroness who's funding his project. Quite right." She looked at him again and straightened up in the chair. "And you took Edison to chase squirrels? Are you insane? Could have lost him." The smirk was back on Hunter's face again. "I was not named Hunter for nothing. I would have found him, eventually." He waved a hand through the air, indicating it did not concern him. Snow watched as his eyebrows lifted in arrogance. He didn't look a year over her 13 years, but he seemed to hold himself with an air of a prince. "Your father will arrive home for this evening's meal. Would you care for my company until he arrives?" he asked, interrupting her train of thought. "Oh, no, I'm quite capable of taking care of things here, and it would not appear seemly or appropriate for your company to be found in this home without a chaperone." She stood up, brushed her hands down her silk skirt, and turned towards the parlor. With the young man in her home, didn't follow her to the front door, she did something that no self-respecting young woman would do. She pulled off a kid glove from one hand and placed 2 fingers in her mouth and blew. The whistle sounded throughout the house, a high-pitched sound that set Edison barking loudly at the back kitchen door. Snow managed to get her glove back on her hand as Hunter rounded the corner of the hallway, in rather a hurrying, watching over his shoulder for the great beast to storm the building. She tried very hard to keep the humor off her face, but managed to cover it up with a polite little cough into her hand. "Please tell my father dinner will be at 8. Good day, Mr. Hunter." She was being rude, she knew, but she wouldn't let decorum be waylaid any further in their household, any more than it already had. Hunter stepped through the door she had opened for him, then turned to talk to her. She nodded and closed the door before he had a chance to complete his salutations. She needed to talk to her father. Chapter 3. Once dinner was seen to and preparations made for the next day, Snow sat about the parlor, trying to look like she hadn't been waiting all afternoon and most of the evening for her father to come home. Reading failed to keep her interest. Edison only further tried her patience, and sketching led to drawing of the strange boy's face. Exasperated, she dropped her sketchbook on the side table and paced the floor's length. As soon as she heard footsteps on the front step, Snow raced to open the door, only to find Hunter laden with plans and papers, followed closely by her father, who was talking, rattling off a list of equipment and supplies. Hunter was writing them all down in a notebook, much to her surprise. He really was an assistant after all. "Father, you are home. Where have you been?" She took his coat and top hat and placed them on the hallway side table. "Snow, my love, please, a cup of tea in the kitchen, my dear." Then continued to list everything he needed as he walked down into the basement workshop, wherein he discovered it very empty, He turned around and climbed the stairs and entered the kitchen, all the while rattling off more equipment and lists of material he needed for his new workshop. The coal merchant will have to be notified of the greater demands, and we will need to talk to the Baroness about the sheet metal, the coils, and the fasteners that are required. Did you get all that, my boy?" "Yes, sir," he replied, bowed to both the gentleman and to Snow, once again displaying that all too familiar smirk on his lips. "I will be back in the morning to attend you to the workshop, my lord." Then he was gone. "Snow, what a joyous day!" His delight was evident as he took her hand and swung her around the kitchen, like she was still a small child. "Father, where is your new workshop?" as they stopped for a breather. "Why, in our new patron's home, of course." "The Baroness has a workshop for you on her estate?" "Yes, my dear, many things are changing." He took her chin in his hand. "Life is never going to be the same again, my love." And indeed, everything did change from that day onward. Baroness Reina Montague from the northern provinces had heard of Mastro Peto's application of funding for a city that floated in the sky, and she was so intrigued by the concept that she became its chief campaigner and leading financier. She gave him everything he needed to complete Phase 1 and 2 of the project, and used the results to gain further funding for the rest of the venture. When a new mansion was built for Mastro Peto and his daughter, they moved the workshop and all of the belongings into the giant castle on a cliff top, overlooking the bay and the village below. It was all overwhelming for Snow, to say the least, but it came with full-service staff, including a cook and a butler. It wasn't without its perks, either. She had an enormous study of her own, full to the architraves with books. Next to this study was her own private studio, her own workshop of sorts. She started turning her sketches into plans and began experimenting with gadgeteering, creating metallic creatures and mechanical birds. She even managed to design a new collar for Edison, one with a retractable cord so he could run off without running away. It almost worked, too, until she realized he weighed more than she did. One episode of being dragged along the path, until she managed to remove the lead cuff from her arm, was enough. But even though she was never in want for anything, she felt lonely, for it was like her father disappeared overnight. She saw him maybe once a day, if that, and only because he needed to eat. She understood why his project was so important to him, and wanted to give him what much support, but she dearly missed him. If it wasn't at the work site or in his workshop, he was at some dinner party or fundraiser with Baroness Montague. Snow shivered just thinking about the woman. It was getting easier and easier to despise her. She changed their home. She changed Snow's clothing and hair, stating that she was a young lady now and shouldn't be seen wearing her hair down any longer. Then the Baroness made her quit schooling for elocution, etiquette, and dance lessons. It was all so frustrating and boring, but Snow believed it was what her father wanted, so she endured. Her father's workshop at the base of the castle became a flurry of activity. The work site on the vacant land beside the castle was always busy. The 3 enormous steam engines were built first. Then the rest of the city was assembled around them. Altogether it took them 2 years, 300 engineers, mechanics and gadgeteers, a few hundred tons of steel and titanium alloy, coal and sheet glass. It took 8 years to design, and 2 years to build the world's first city that floated in the sky. But build it, they did it. At the launch of the giant mechanical city, King Hereford, his sons, Prince Philip and Prince Charming, and their royal entourage were enthralled as the city left its mooring and floated above the sea. The king dubbed the city Skylands, and dubbed Mastro Peto Lord and Keeper of the new city. The launch and Lord Peto's inauguration speech was the most publicized news across the land. The Mirror became a regional paper to keep up with press demands, and an expose of the life and times of Lord Peto was taken up by every media in the country. Snow's father, along with Baroness Montague, became the most recognized faces in all the land, much to Snow's dismay. She knew the Baroness liked her father, but she hated the thought of ever becoming the horrible woman's daughter. So quoth this raven. Oh, my darlings, we have Lord Peto again, and his precious Snow White. I think this is going to be a fun series too, and I hope you enjoy it. Let Joy Finlay know, and give it a like on here. If you leave a comment, I will do my very best to comment back. I love interacting with you, my darlings. And if you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will see you next time, my darlings. Bye-bye.